Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organization cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome everybody. You're listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. This is where we take on the tough conversations about selfhood, culture, and the system we live inside. I'm Gunter Swoboda. I'm a psychologist, author, and someone who's spent decades working with men, women, and families trying to navigate what we call mental health. Today's episode, why antidepressants aren't enough, and what that actually says about the way we treat or fail to treat psychological distress. So let me start with the blunt truth. Since the year 2000, Australia has seen a massive increase in antidepressant use. We are one of the world's top consumers per capita. By 2022, around 1 in 7 Australians were prescribed an antidepressant. But here's the paradox. Despite the pharmacological situation, suicide rates remain stubbornly high, especially among men, and especially among men who have separated or become divorced. And the other group is especially those over 85. Meanwhile, young women are experiencing psychological distress at rates that we've never seen before. Up to 40% report symptoms of depression, anxiety, or both. So we got to ask the question, what's going wrong? Is there a situation where we're overprescribing? Are we misdiagnosing? Or have we simply put too much faith in a single kind of solution? So on the ground floor, what does the system look like? Most people walk into the GP clinic. They're tired, disconnected, maybe irritable or withdrawn. Maybe they're overwhelmed. The GP listens, usually briefly, and offers a script for an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Now this, unfortunately for many, is the entire treatment. It's fast, it's available, it's subsidised. But what it often isn't is enough. So let's talk about this issue about serotonin. In our culture currently, we've been sold a very seductive idea for the past 30 years that depression is caused by chemical imbalance, especially low serotonin. Now, here's the problem. The idea has actually never been definitively proven. In fact, a major review in 2022 by Moncrief and his colleagues, published in Molecular Psychiatry, found no clear evidence that low serotonin causes depression. None. The so-called chemical imbalance theory was more of a marketing narrative than a scientific conclusion. SSRIs don't work by correcting a known deficiency. What they do is they alter transmitter activity. Yes, but exactly how that translates to mood improvement is still completely uncertain. Their benefit for many appear to come from blunting emotional extremes, not from restoring any measurable biological balance. Now, word of caution here, this doesn't mean they're useless, but it does mean that we need to be honest. Antidepressants are not a magic bullet. And the way that we talk about them, as if they fix a broken brain, is both scientifically outdated and clinically irresponsible. It narrows distress down to biology. It silences the context wherein the person experiences that distress. And it offers false certainty in a place of difficult truths. Now, again, we could get into the issue here about placebo and how placebo can actually work. But that's not the point in this particular podcast. Now, here's what antidepressants don't do. They don't resolve childhood trauma. They don't heal broken relationships. They don't change your job conditions or end domestic violence. And they don't give you a sense of purpose. In fact, in many instances, people become emotionally less motivated. What they do then do is they just might dull the pain just enough to keep going. And sometimes that's exactly what's needed in the short term. But too often, they become a long-term substitute for care. Because real care takes time, money, and emotional commitment. Now, another issue that arises in this particular area where we need to really keep a good look at the factors is that there are gendered treatment gaps. And what we mean by that is that there is a disconnect when we look at things through the lens of male-female. Women are much more likely to be prescribed antidepressants, especially during midlife and following childbirth. But we need to ask, are they being medicated for a biological illness or for the burnout, exhaustion, and emotional labour that come from being overextended and under-supported? Men, on the other hand, are less likely to seek help until they're in crisis. Their depression doesn't always look like sadness. It may show up as anger, substance use, withdrawal. And when they do present, they are often dismissed or given a pill without further exploration. We end up over-medicating women's distress and under-treating men. Neither approach gets down to the root of the suffering. So we need to consider this then from a systemic perspective. Are we actually looking at a systemic problem? I believe that one of the larger issues here is the structure of our mental health care system. By and large, we rely on general practitioners who often have limited training in mental health to assess, diagnose, and treat complex psychological conditions. The other thing is that GPs, especially in Australia, are really stretched when it comes to being able to spend the time with people. The other problem is that psychological services are expensive, fragmented, and generally stretched really thin. Like in my practice, it may take anything between 6 to 9 weeks to get an appointment. Occasionally that fluctuates, and my business manager is very, very good at being able to provide people with appointments through cancellations, or when there's an opening, when it's a little bit slower. But by and large, that 6 to 8 week period is the norm. In the community-based care, it gets patchy, and preventative services are underfunded. The other models that we have is like peer-led models that do exist, but they also lack mainstream support. And there's also a question about relative training and experience in those areas. So what happens then in practice? Well, we fall back on the script, the 15-minute appointment, the chemical intervention, and the illusion of progress. One of the common things that I hear from clients who've been on antidepressants, especially long-term, is that they're actually not even sure whether the medication is working, and if so, in what way. What I do get is some of the side effects. And, you know, we talk about side effects with antidepressants in the beginning, but some people experience what they think is their anxiety or depression, but which is actually an artifact of the medication, well and truly beyond the 6 to 8 weeks of the system, their physical and neurological system adapting. It's a serious thing that needs to be taken into consideration. It's also something that requires education, both of the professional, but also the end user, the consumer. So what would real care look like? The sort of care that we could have. Well, the first thing is that real care is not passive. It's not simply popping a pill. It's also not transactional. Real care involves curiosity and not just diagnosis. We need to ask the question, why is the person suffering? Not just how to suppress it. It explores meaning, it explores memory, relationships, and embodiment. In the early to mid 80s, I worked on a program called Women and Benzodiazepines. This is before SSRIs became very popular. And one of the artifacts that we began to identify was that a lot of women being prescribed benzodiazepines, anxiolytics, were to women who were in situations wherein their marriage was problematic. They may have been in a domestic violence situation or at the receiving end of emotional abuse and manipulation. Now, the issue was one where the medication allowed them to tolerate the intolerable. That's true that some of this may, in fact, apply now, as we're talking about, with selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, because those drugs do dampen our emotional reactions down. They do, you know, in very many instances, reduce motivation to change. Again, a counterpoint. For some people, antidepressants can be a lifeline, but they should never really be the only rope that's thrown to them. So when we talk about good care, we need to have a model that's integrative. Medication when appropriate, psychotherapy that explores narrative, identity, trauma. We need also a system that provides some peer support. In many instances, we need better access to housing, income, and community networks. We also need more gender-responsive care that understands the cultural scripts we're all carrying. So what's the bottom line here? Well, the bottom line is that we need to treat the person. We don't just need to regulate their chemistry, their neurochemistry. So what are some of my final reflections in this department? Well, I'm certainly not suggesting that we abandon antidepressants altogether. As I said, there is a time and place for them. But we do need to stop pretending that they're a cure for pain that is often about relationships, that is often existential, like the place that I exist in terms of purpose and meaning, and that in many instances is systemic. When your boss is an asshole, of course you're going to react emotionally. When the system that you're trying to exist in is one that's highly stressful and demonstrably problematic, medication isn't going to help. We need to stop telling people that their sadness is just a glitch in serotonin. Nothing further from the truth. We need to start asking how our culture, our economy, our gender norms, and our broken systems are making people sick. Let me reference again Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal. We also need to start building spaces, both clinical and cultural, where healing can actually take place. And healing takes not just a time in space, but it needs time, period. Healing doesn't come in a capsule. The real healing comes from connection with each other, in being seen, in being heard, being given that time, space, and support to make meaning out of our suffering. So there's a lot more that I could say in this area. I want you to think about this. I want people to honestly reflect on what they're told is the truth, because some of what we're told is a mythology, is not truth. So if this episode challenged something for you or clarified something you've always felt, share it. Start a conversation. Ask better questions, especially from treatment providers, GPs, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists. Listen more deeply. And remember, the answers don't always lie in biology. In fact, that is the reductionist idea that somehow the smallest focus on the smallest aspect of our being is going to create changes to the whole. The reality is that sometimes they lie in the story. So until next time, stay grounded, stay engaged, and keep challenging the narratives that keep us small, disempowered, and stuck. I'm going to pick up with this particular topic in the next podcast, which essentially is the politics of the brain in mental health. And until next time, this is me signing off.
Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.